What would you do if you found a dying alien at your doorstep? Not the Hollywood kind with laser guns and invasion fleets, but a small, frightened creature no bigger than a house cat, bleeding in the snow outside your bedroom window. Most people would call the authorities, maybe take a video for social media. But 12-year-old Marcus Chen did something that would reshape humanity's place in the galaxy forever. He opened the door. This is the story of how one act of simple human kindness became the catalyst for the greatest alliance the universe had ever seen. How a boy who couldn't even keep his goldfish alive became the bridge between two civilizations. And how sometimes the most powerful force in the cosmos isn't technology or weapons, it's the inexplicable human urge to help something that's hurt, no matter how strange or impossible it might seem. But Marcus had no idea that the small, shivering creature scratching at his door was actually Commander Zixel of the Kepler Defense Force, or that his decision to bring her inside would make him the most important human being who ever lived. All he knew was that something was hurt. It was cold, and his parents always taught him that you don't turn your back on suffering. The galaxy was about to learn what that really meant. The scratching started just after midnight on the coldest night Minnesota had seen in 30 years. Marcus Chen rolled over in his bed, pulling his Star Wars comforter up to his chin, trying to ignore the sound. Probably just a raccoon or something trying to get warm. But the scratching continued, weak and desperate, like something was dying out there. Marcus sat up, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air of his bedroom. His parents kept the heat low to save money, especially during his dad's long stretches between construction jobs. Through his frost-covered window, he could see nothing but swirling snow and the dim glow of the streetlight at the end of their driveway. The scratching came again, more urgent this time. Marcus grabbed his phone and used its flashlight to peer through the glass. At first, he saw nothing but the wooden deck outside his ground-floor bedroom window. Then, something moved in the snow near the door, something small and dark against the white. His heart hammered as he quietly opened his window, not wanting to wake his parents. The bitter cold hit him like a physical blow, making his eyes water instantly. But in the beam of his phone's light, he could clearly see something extraordinary. It looked like a cat, but wrong in every way that mattered. Its fur was a deep purple that seemed to shimmer, even in the harsh LED light. And it had 6 legs instead of 4. 3 eyes, golden and intelligent, stared up at him with an expression that seemed far too human for any animal. Dark fluid, probably blood, matted the creature's fur along its right side. Marcus had always been the kid who brought home injured birds and stray dogs, much to his mother's exasperation. He'd tried to nurse a wounded squirrel back to health just last month, staying up all night to make sure it was warm and fed. This was different, though. This was impossible. But the creature was clearly hurt, and it was definitely going to freeze to death if he left it outside. Marcus grabbed his winter coat from the floor and climbed out his bedroom window, his bare feet immediately going numb in the snow. The creature watched him approach, those golden eyes tracking his every movement. It didn't run or hiss like a normal cat would. Instead, it seemed to be studying him with the same intensity that he was studying it. When Marcus knelt down beside it, the creature made a sound unlike anything he'd ever heard. It was musical, almost like singing, but with undertones that made his chest vibrate. The sound conveyed pain and exhaustion, but also something that might have been gratitude. The creature allowed Marcus to scoop it up in his coat. It was heavier than it looked, and its body temperature felt wrong, too cool for a mammal. But it was alive, and that was what mattered. Marcus could feel its rapid heartbeat through the coat, and those 3 golden eyes never left his face as he carefully climbed back through his window. His bedroom felt tropical compared to the outside air. Marcus gently placed the creature on his bed, wrapping it in his spare blanket. He turned on his desk lamp for warmth and took his first real look at what he'd rescued. The creature was definitely not from Earth. Its fur had an almost metallic quality, shifting between purple and silver as it moved. The 6 legs were perfectly proportioned, ending in what looked like tiny hands rather than paws. Each digit had a small, retractable claw that gleamed like polished steel. The 3 eyes were arranged in a triangle pattern on its head, with the largest eye in the center and 2 smaller ones flanking it. But it was the intelligence in those eyes that truly unsettled Marcus. This wasn't an animal. This was something that could think, something that understood what was happening to it. The creature studied Marcus for several long moments, then did something that made him gasp. It pressed one of its tiny hands against its chest and made a sound that was unmistakably a word, though not in any language Marcus recognized. Then it pointed that same hand at Marcus and raised what might have been an eyebrow. It was asking for his name. Marcus pointed to himself and spoke quietly, not wanting to wake his parents. "Marcus, I'm Marcus." The creature attempted to repeat the name, its voice creating something that sounded like Marcus, but with musical undertones that made it beautiful rather than strange. Then it pointed to itself again and spoke clearly. "Zixal." Marcus tried to repeat it and failed miserably, his human vocal cords unable to create the proper harmonics. The creature, Zixal, seemed to understand his limitation and made a shorter sound that might have been a nickname. "Zix," Marcus said, and the creature's eyes seemed to brighten with approval. Over the next hour, Marcus did what he could to treat Zix's wounds using his limited first aid knowledge from Boy Scouts. The injury along her side, he was somehow certain Zix was female, wasn't as bad as it had looked, more like a deep scratch than anything life-threatening. But she was clearly exhausted and cold. Marcus gave her small amounts of water from his water bottle, which she drank gratefully. When he offered her some crackers from his desk drawer, she examined them carefully before taking tiny, experimental bites. She seemed to approve, eating several crackers before curling up in his blanket. As Zix settled in for what Marcus hoped would be healing sleep, he sat in his desk chair and tried to process what was happening. He had an alien in his bedroom. An actual, honest-to-goodness extraterrestrial being was sleeping in his Star Wars blanket, trusting him to keep her safe. Marcus had always dreamed of something like this happening, but the reality was both more wonderful and more terrifying than any fantasy. Zix was clearly intelligent, possibly more intelligent than humans, but she was also vulnerable right now, injured and alone on a hostile planet. His parents would never believe this. Hell, Marcus wasn't sure he believed it himself. But the evidence was right there, breathing steadily under his blanket. 3 eyes, 6 legs, purple fur that seemed to generate its own soft light in the darkness. As the night wore on, Marcus found himself watching Zix sleep. Her breathing was different from any Earth animal, with longer pauses between breaths and a subtle musical quality to each exhalation. Sometimes she would move her tiny hands as if she were operating invisible controls, and Marcus wondered if she was dreaming about flying a spaceship or walking on some distant world. Near dawn, Zix woke up and immediately looked around until her eyes found Marcus, who had dozed off in his chair. She made a soft sound of greeting, and Marcus realized that she looked much better. The golden color in her eyes was brighter, and she was moving with more confidence. Zix climbed out of the blanket and walked to Marcus's window, standing on her hind legs to peer outside. She made a series of sounds that conveyed obvious distress, and Marcus realized she was looking for something, or someone. "Are you lost?" Marcus asked quietly. Zix turned to him and began making a complex series of gestures with her hands while speaking in her musical language. Even though Marcus couldn't understand the words, her meaning was clear. She was trying to tell him something important, something urgent. She pointed to the sky, then to herself, then to the ground. She had fallen from the sky. Then she made flying motions with her hands and pointed upward again, her expression becoming desperate. With trust, Teddy. She needed to get back up there. Marcus felt his heart sink. He'd saved Zix's life, but now she needed to go home, and he had no idea how to help her do that. He was just a 12-year-old kid with a paper route and a C- in science. What could he possibly do to help an alien get back to space? But as he looked into those 3 golden eyes, Marcus knew he would try. Somehow, some way, he would help Zykes get home. The question was how to do it without his parents, the government, or anyone else finding out about her. Marcus had watched enough movies to know that if the authorities got hold of Zix, she'd end up in some laboratory being studied like a specimen. The thought made him angry. Zix seemed to understand his internal struggle. She walked over to him and gently placed one of her tiny hands on his knee, making a sound that was unmistakably meant to be comforting. Then she did something that amazed Marcus even more, began to speak in English. The words were slow and carefully pronounced, as if she were translating them in her head before speaking. Marcus helped Zix. Zix thanked Marcus. Zix learned Marcus speak now. Marcus stared at her in shock. You can learn English? Just like that? Zykes tilted her head in a gesture that was surprisingly human-like. Zix mind work fast, Marcus speak not hard, for Zix. Zix need Marcus help find ship. Your spaceship, it's here? On Earth? Zix made a sound that might have been a sigh. Ship broken. Zykes crash in big cold white. She gestured toward the window, clearly meaning the snow. Ship hide now. Zix must fix ship, go home to warn people. Warn them about what? For the first time since Marcus had found her, Zix looked truly frightened. Her 3 eyes dimmed, and she spoke in barely a whisper. Bad ones coming. Bad ones want hurt all good peoples. Zykes must warn home people before bad ones find Marcus World. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold outside. Earth was in danger, and somehow helping Zix get home might be the only way to save everyone he cared about. His quiet suburban life was about to become very, very complicated. Marcus spent the next 3 days living 2 completely different lives. During the day, he attended 7th grade at Lincoln Middle School, sat through pre-algebra and earth science classes, and pretended that nothing had changed. At night, he secretly cared for an alien refugee who was rapidly becoming the most important person in his life. Zykes learned English at an astounding rate. By the 2nd day, she could hold basic conversations, though her voice still carried those strange musical undertones that made even simple words sound beautiful. She explained that her species, the Veltar, had developed technology that allowed them to rapidly decode and learn new languages by analyzing speech patterns and context. The more Zykes shared about her people and her mission, the more Marcus realized how serious their situation was. The Veltar were part of something called the Kepler Defense Coalition, an alliance of peaceful species that worked together to protect developing civilizations from a threat known as the Harvesters. The Harvesters, according to Zix, were a nomadic species that consumed entire planets, stripping them of resources and leaving barren husks behind. They had been moving through this region of the galaxy for centuries, and Earth was directly in their path. Zykes had been part of an advanced scout team sent to evaluate Earth's readiness for contact and potential defense. Her ship had been damaged during a skirmish with Harvester scouts, forcing her to crash land during one of the worst blizzards in Minnesota's history. Marcus found it hard to concentrate on anything else. While his classmates worried about pop quizzes and who was dating whom, Marcus carried the weight of knowing that Earth was facing an existential threat that no one else even knew existed. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked one evening, as he sat cross-legged on his bedroom floor, watching Zix work on some kind of device she'd constructed from spare electronics and components she'd somehow synthesized from household materials. Zykes' 3 eyes focused on different aspects of her work as she answered. Harvest fleet move slow but never stop. Zykes think maybe 3-4 Marcus seasons before they reach Marcus World. Seasons? You mean a year? Zix paused in her work, considering the translation. Yes, 1 year, maybe little more. But Zix must warn Coalition first. They send help, teach Marcus's people how to fight Harvesters. Marcus watched as Zix carefully adjusted tiny components with tools she'd crafted from paper clips and pen parts. Her level of intelligence was staggering. In 3 days, she had essentially reverse-engineered human technology and was now building what appeared to be a sophisticated communication device. But the more advanced her English became, the more Marcus could hear the fear in her voice when she talked about the harvesters. Whatever they were, they had even the coalition scared. "What happens if you can't contact your people?" Marcus asked. Zix went very still. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Then Marcus' world dies alone. Harvesters take everything, turn beautiful planet into empty rock." The weight of responsibility was crushing. Marcus was 12 years old. He should be worried about homework and whether Emma Rodriguez would notice him in the hallway. Instead, he was harboring an alien refugee and might be humanity's only hope for survival. On Thursday morning, everything changed. Marcus was eating breakfast when his mother mentioned that there had been strange reports on the news about unusual electromagnetic activity in the area. Several people had reported electronic devices malfunctioning, and there were rumors of lights in the sky during the blizzard earlier that week. Marcus nearly choked on his cereal. He glanced toward his bedroom door, behind which Zix was hiding with strict instructions to remain silent and invisible until he returned from school. "Probably just the storm messing with the power lines," his father said, barely looking up from his phone. You know how the news loves to make a big deal out of nothing, but Marcus knew it wasn't nothing. Zix's ship was out there somewhere, probably still giving off energy signatures that sensitive equipment could detect. It was only a matter of time before someone started asking the right questions. At school, Marcus couldn't focus on anything. During lunch, he overheard two teachers discussing how several students had reported strange dreams about music in the sky during the night of the blizzard. Marcus felt his blood go cold. Zix had mentioned that her species sometimes projected thoughts and feelings when they were in distress. Her crash might have affected more people than they realized. When Marcus got home that afternoon, he found Zix working frantically on her communication device. She looked up as he entered, and her expression was grim. "Zix feel harvester scouts getting closer," she said without preamble. "They follow Zix ship trail. Find crashed ship soon. Maybe find Zix, too." Marcus felt his world tilt. How soon? Maybe 2 days. Maybe less. Zix held up the device she'd been building. "Zix almost finish call home machine, but need power. Much power. More than Marcus' house can give." Marcus thought frantically. What could provide the kind of power Zix needed? The school had backup generators, but he couldn't get access to those. The mall had a large electrical system, but again, no access. Then he remembered something his uncle had mentioned during their last visit. Uncle Jim worked at the power station outside town, and he'd always bragged about the massive transformers and electrical systems there. If Zix needed serious power, that would be the place to find it. But breaking into a power station was definitely illegal and definitely dangerous. Marcus was already risking everything by hiding Zix. If they got caught now, there would be no explaining their way out of it. Zix seemed to read his thoughts. "Marcus, think of power place? Maybe. But it's dangerous, and if we get caught," Zix moved closer to Marcus, and for the first time since he'd found her, she looked truly desperate. "Zix understand Marcus' fear, but if Zix no call home, harvesters find Earth with no warning. All Marcus people die. Marcus family die." The thought of his parents, his little sister visiting from college, all of his friends and classmates being wiped out by some cosmic horror was too much to bear. Marcus felt tears welling up in his eyes. "I'm just a kid," he whispered. "I don't know how to save the world." Zix reached out with one of her tiny hands and gently touched Marcus's cheek. When she spoke, her voice was filled with a warmth that reminded Marcus of his grandmother's hugs. Marcus not just kid. Marcus good heart person who help Zix when no need to help. Marcus brave. Marcus care about others more than self. This make Marcus special. This make Marcus able to do impossible things. Something in her words, or maybe in the musical undertones of her voice, made Marcus feel stronger. He wiped his eyes and took a deep breath. Okay, we'll do it. We'll get you to the power station. Zix's eyes brightened considerably. Zix thanked Marcus, but dangerous for Marcus to go. Zix can go alone if Marcus tell way. Marcus shook his head firmly. No way. You don't know the area, and you don't understand how human security works. Besides, he managed a weak smile. We're in this together now. They spent the rest of the afternoon planning. Marcus drew maps of the power station for memory, marking the locations of security cameras and the easiest ways to approach without being seen. Zix studied the layouts with intense concentration, asking detailed questions about human security procedures and the layout of the electrical systems. As evening approached, Marcus realized that he would have to lie to his parents about where he was going. The thought made him sick to his stomach. He'd never lied to them about anything important before. But what choice did he have? I'm going to sleep over at Danny's house, Marcus told his mother as he packed his backpack with supplies for their mission. His mom said it was okay. His mother barely looked up from her laptop where she was working on some kind of report for her job at the insurance company. Make sure you brush your teeth and don't stay up too late playing video games. The casual nature of the lie felt like a betrayal. His mother trusted him completely, and here he was, planning to break into a federal facility. If something went wrong, if they got caught, his parents would never forgive him. More importantly, they might never trust him again. But as Marcus looked back toward his bedroom, where Zix was making final adjustments to her communication device, he knew he was making the right choice. Sometimes doing the right thing meant risking everything. At 11 o'clock that night, Marcus and Zix climbed out of his bedroom window and began the 2-mile journey to the power station. Marcus had brought his bike, with Zix riding in his backpack to avoid being seen. Her communication device was carefully wrapped in towels to prevent damage. The night was clear and bitterly cold, with no wind to cover the sound of Marcus's bicycle on the frozen road. Every car that passed made him want to hide, convinced that someone would notice a kid riding alone in the middle of the night and call the police. But gradually, the suburban neighborhoods gave way to farmland and industrial areas. The power station sat on a hill overlooking the frozen Minnesota River, its transmission towers reaching into the star-filled sky like metal trees. As they approached the facility, Marcus felt his courage wavering. The place was surrounded by high fences topped with razor wire, and bright floodlights illuminated every approach. Security cameras were mounted at regular intervals, and warning signs in multiple languages made it clear that trespassing was a federal crime. Zix climbed out of the backpack and studied the facility with her 3 eyes, taking in details that Marcus couldn't even see in the darkness. Zix see weak place in fence, she whispered. Also see way to avoid skywatchers. She pointed to the security cameras, but Marcus must be very careful. Very quiet. Marcus nodded, though his hands were shaking so hard he could barely hold his bike steady. What happens if we get caught? Zix looked at him seriously. Then Zix protect Marcus. Tell Skyguard people that Zix make Marcus help. Marcus not get in trouble. The loyalty in her voice, her willingness to sacrifice herself to protect him, gave Marcus the courage he needed. He hid his bike in a drainage ditch and followed Zix toward their destiny. The fate of the world depended on the next hour going perfectly. Getting into the power station turned out to be easier than Marcus had expected, though infinitely more terrifying. Zix's enhanced senses allowed her to detect the patrol patterns of the security guards and predict the sweep cycles of the cameras with uncanny accuracy. She guided Marcus through shadows and blind spots with the precision of someone who had done this kind of infiltration many times before. The weak point in the fence that Zix had identified was a section where recent construction work had left a small gap between 2 security zones. It required crawling through a drainage pipe filled with ice-cold water, but it got them inside the perimeter without triggering any alarms. Marcus's teeth were chattering so hard he was afraid the sound would give them away, but Zix seemed unaffected by the cold. Her purple fur provided better insulation than any winter coat Marcus had ever worn. Once inside the facility, Zix took the lead completely. She seemed to instinctively understand the layout of the electrical systems, moving confidently toward the main transformer building as if she had studied blueprints for weeks. "How do you know where you're going?" Marcus whispered as they crept between massive pieces of industrial equipment. Zix paused to check for guards before answering. "All power places work same way. Zix study many kinds in coalition space. This human place good design, very efficient." They reached the main transformer building without incident, but the door was locked with both a key card reader and a physical deadbolt. Marcus's heart sank. They'd come so far only to be stopped by a simple door. But Sykes had already pulled out one of her improvised tools, a device that looked like a bent paperclip attached to some kind of electronic component. She inserted it into the keycard reader and began making soft musical sounds while manipulating the device. The lock clicked open. Marcus stared at her in amazement. "You just hacked an electronic lock with a paperclip?" Zykes made a sound that might have been amusement. Paperclip very useful. Also, human security not built for Veltar technology, like using Big Hammer to open eggshell. Inside the transformer building, the air thrummed with electrical energy. Massive transformers hummed quietly, stepping down power from the high-voltage transmission lines to levels that could be safely distributed to homes and businesses throughout the region. The smell of ozone and heated metal filled the air. Sykes immediately went to work, connecting her communication device to one of the main power distribution panels with cables she'd somehow constructed during their journey. As soon as the connection was made, her device began to glow with soft purple light that pulsed in complex patterns. "How long will this take?" Marcus asked, keeping watch at the door for any sign of approaching guards. Zix was completely focused on her device, making fine adjustments with tools that seemed to have been crafted from random objects she'd collected. "Call to Homeworld. Take time to reach. Maybe 10 minutes for signal to travel. Then wait for answer. If Zykes people hear call, they answer quick." The 10 minutes stretched into the longest period of Marcus's life. Every small sound made him jump. Every shift in the building's mechanical noises convinced him that security guards were approaching. His hands were sweating despite the cold, and his heart was pounding so hard he was surprised Zix couldn't hear it. But gradually, Zix's device began to emit more complex sounds. The musical tones were joined by harmonics and frequencies that seemed to resonate in Marcus's bones. The lights in the building flickered in rhythm with the device's pulsing. Then, suddenly, the device erupted with sound and light. Music filled the air, complex and beautiful and utterly alien. Zix's 3 eyes were glowing brightly and she was making rapid gestures with her hands while speaking in her native language. Marcus realized he was listening to the first interstellar communication in human history. Zix spoke urgently for several minutes, occasionally pointing toward Marcus or gesturing at their surroundings. Whatever she was saying seemed to cause quite a stir on the other end of the conversation, because the responses became increasingly excited and rapid. Finally, Zix stepped back from the device and turned to Marcus with an expression of relief and joy. "Zix people here call. They send help ship right away. Also send message to Coalition Council. Earthworld now under Coalition protection." Marcus felt a wave of relief so powerful that his knees nearly buckled. They'd done it. Against all odds, a 12-year-old boy and a wounded alien had managed to save the world, but their celebration was cut short by the sound of approaching vehicles and shouting voices outside the building. Powerful searchlights began sweeping the area around the transformer station. "Marcus, come out with your hands visible. We know you're in there." Marcus's blood turned to ice. Somehow, security had found them. Maybe the electrical anomalies from Zykes' transmission had triggered alarms, or maybe they'd been spotted by cameras they hadn't noticed. "What do we do?" Marcus whispered frantically. Zix was rapidly disconnecting her device and packing it into her makeshift carrying case. Zix people say help ship arrive in 2 hours. Must hide until then. 2 hours? How are we supposed to hide for 2 hours with half the police force looking for us? Before Zix could answer, the door to the transformer building burst open. Bright flashlight beams flooded the room, and Marcus found himself looking at 3 security guards in tactical gear, all pointing weapons at him and Zix. "Nobody move! Put your hands where we can see them!" Marcus slowly raised his hands, his mind racing through possible explanations for what they'd been doing. But how could he possibly explain breaking into a federal facility with an alien who had been using the power grid to call across interstellar space? One of the guards stepped forward, his weapon still trained on Marcus. "Son, you're in a lot of trouble. Breaking and entering a federal power facility is a serious crime. But if you cooperate with us, we can work something out." The guard's flashlight beam swept across Zix, who had gone completely still beside the transformer. For a moment, Marcus thought they might not notice how unusual she looked in the chaotic lighting and shadows. Then one of the other guards shouted, "What the hell is that thing?" All 3 flashlights focused on Zix, clearly revealing her purple fur, 6 legs, and 3 golden eyes. The guards stepped backward in shock, their weapons wavering as they tried to process what they were seeing. Marcus knew this was the moment that would determine everything. If these guards panicked and started shooting, Zix could be killed. If they called in federal agents, she would disappear into some government laboratory and never be seen again. The Coalition rescue ship would arrive to find nothing but questions and cover-ups. But as Marcus looked at Zix, he saw something that gave him hope. She wasn't afraid. Her 3 eyes were calm and focused, and she was studying the guards with the same intense intelligence she'd shown when analyzing human technology. Slowly, Zix stood up to her full height and began to speak. "Please not harm Marcus," she said in her carefully pronounced English. "Marcus good person. Help Zix because Zix hurt and cold. Marcus not know Zix different until after help given." The guards stared at her in stunned silence. One of them, a middle-aged man with sergeant stripes on his uniform, lowered his weapon slightly. It talks," he said in a voice filled with awe. Zix took a small step forward, her hands visible and non-threatening. "Zix, not it. Zix person, like Marcus person, like you people. Zix come from far place to help Earthworld. Marcus helped Zix save all humans from bad ones coming." The sergeant looked back and forth between Marcus and Zix, clearly struggling to process the situation. "Are you saying this person is from outer space?" "Zix from planet called Veltarha, many light years from Earthworld. Zix people part of coalition that protect good planets from harvester destroyers. Earthworld in danger, but now Zix call for help. Coalition send ships to teach humans how to fight bad ones." One of the other guards, a younger man whose hands were shaking as he held his weapon, spoke up. "This is insane. This has got to be some kind of hoax. Special effects or something." But the sergeant was studying Zix more carefully, taking in details that couldn't be faked. Her 6 legs moved with perfect coordination. Her 3 eyes tracked independently, focusing on different guards simultaneously. Her fur actually seemed to generate its own light in the darkness. "If you're really from another planet," the sergeant said slowly, "prove it." Zix reached into her carrying case and pulled out a small device that Marcus had never seen before. She held it up so the guards could see it clearly, then activated it with a gesture. It projected a 3-dimensional hologram into the air above their heads. It showed the solar system as seen from space, with Earth clearly visible as a small blue dot. Then the view pulled back to show nearby star systems and the paths of several large objects moving through space toward the solar system. "Harvester fleet," Zix explained, pointing to the approaching objects. "They destroy planets for resources. Earth next target. But now coalitions and help ships. Earthworld safe if humans willing to learn and fight together." The hologram was clearly beyond any human technology. The detail was perfect, showing star systems and planetary movements with precision that would have required supercomputers to generate. But Zykes was projecting it from a device no larger than a smartphone. The youngest guard lowered his weapon completely. "Jesus Christ, this is really happening. We're not alone." The sergeant was quiet for a long moment, studying the hologram and clearly wrestling with the implications of what he was seeing. Finally, he looked at Marcus. "Son, do you understand what's happening here? Do you realize what this means?" Marcus nodded solemnly. "It means everything changes. But Zyke says her people can help us. We don't have to face this alone." The sergeant made a decision that would alter the course of human history. Instead of calling for backup and federal agents, instead of arresting Marcus and confiscating Zyx for study, he holstered his weapon and spoke into his radio.
"Control, this is Sergeant Rodriguez at the power station. We need to clear the area and establish a perimeter."
"We have a diplomatic situation that requires special handling. And contact the base commander. Tell him he's going to want to see this personally." As the guards began coordinating the security response, Zykes moved closer to Marcus and spoke quietly. "Coalition ship arrives soon. Marcus meet Zyx people. See that they good like Marcus good. Earthworld about to become part of something bigger than any human ever dream." Marcus looked up at the stars visible through the building's windows and realized that his small act of kindness had opened a door that could never be closed. Humanity was about to take its first steps into a larger universe, and it was all because a 12-year-old boy couldn't ignore something that was hurt and cold. The galaxy was about to discover what humans were really capable of when they were given a chance to help. The Coalition rescue ship arrived exactly 2 hours later, appearing in the night sky above the power station like a star that had suddenly decided to come closer. It was nothing like the flying saucers from movies, instead resembling an elegant crystalline structure that seemed to bend light around itself, creating patterns of aurora that danced across its surface. By that time, the area around the power station had been transformed into an impromptu first contact site. Sergeant Rodriguez had somehow convinced his superiors to treat the situation as a diplomatic emergency rather than a security threat. Though Marcus suspected that Zykes' demonstration of clearly advanced technology had influenced that decision significantly. Military vehicles had arrived within an hour, followed by officials from various government agencies that Marcus couldn't identify. But instead of the chaos and hostility he'd expected, there was an atmosphere of barely controlled excitement. Humanity's first confirmed contact with extraterrestrial intelligence was happening in a power station in rural Minnesota, and everyone involved seemed to understand the historical importance of getting it right. Colonel Sarah Martinez, the base commander who had arrived to personally oversee the situation, had spent the intervening time interviewing both Marcus and Zyx extensively. She was a small, intense woman with gray streaks in her black hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Marcus had been terrified that he would be arrested or that his parents would be called. But Colonel Martinez had surprised him by treating him as a crucial part of the first contact team rather than a criminal. "Marcus," she had said during their initial interview, "I want you to understand something. What you did, helping Zyx when she was injured, that decision may have saved not just Earth, but countless other worlds that would have been destroyed by these harvesters. Your actions tonight make you one of the most important people in human history." The weight of that responsibility was overwhelming, but Marcus found comfort in the fact that Zyx remained by his side throughout all the interviews and preparations. She had insisted that Marcus be treated as her official liaison to humanity, arguing that their bond of trust was too important to disrupt. Now, as the Coalition ship descended toward the makeshift landing zone that had been established in the power station's parking lot, Marcus felt a mixture of excitement and terror that left him almost paralyzed. The ship landed without making any sound, simply settling onto the frozen asphalt as gently as a feather. Up close, it was even more beautiful than it had appeared in the sky, its crystalline surfaces refracting the floodlights into patterns of rainbow light that painted the surrounding buildings in shifting colors. An opening appeared in the ship's side, though Marcus couldn't see any doors or hatches. The material simply became permeable, allowing three figures to emerge into the cold Minnesota night. The first was clearly another Veltar like Zix, though larger and with deep blue fur instead of purple. The second was humanoid, but with skin that seemed to be made of living crystal, reflecting light in ways that made Marcus's eyes water if he looked directly at them. The third was the most disturbing, resembling a massive spider with far too many eyes, but moving with a grace that suggested intelligence rather than animalistic instinct. Marcus instinctively stepped backward, but Zix placed a gentle hand on his arm and began making musical sounds that he now recognized as her species' greeting ritual. The blue-furred Veltar responded with equally complex harmonies, and soon all four aliens were engaged in what appeared to be a joyful reunion. Colonel Martinez and her team had withdrawn to a respectful distance, clearly understanding that this moment belonged to Zix and her rescuers. But Marcus remained close by, feeling oddly protective of the alien who had become so important to him. After several minutes of conversation in the Veltar language, Zix turned to Marcus and gestured for him to join them. Marcus, meet Zix Commander and coalition friends. Commander Thekval, she indicated the blue Veltar, science leader Krixthan, the crystalline being, and military advisor Vorgesh. The spider-like creature somehow managed to nod in a way that seemed friendly despite its intimidating appearance. Commander Thekval stepped forward and began to speak in accented but clear English. Marcus of Earth humans, Zix, has told us of your kindness and courage. The coalition is in your debt. Marcus felt his face burning with embarrassment. I just did what anyone would do. She was hurt. Science leader Krixthan made a sound like crystal chimes ringing in harmony. When they spoke, their voice had the quality of music played on glass instruments. Marcus Human, you would be surprised how rare such instinctive compassion is throughout the galaxy. Most species require extensive evaluation before they will help strangers, especially those who are clearly different from themselves. Military advisor Vorgesh moved closer, and Marcus forced himself not to step backward despite every instinct screaming at him to run from the massive arachnid. Young Marcus, your species shows promise that the coalition has rarely seen. To help without expectation of reward, to risk safety for stranger beings, this suggests that Earth humans may become valuable allies in the fight against the Harvesters. Commander Thekval nodded in agreement. The Coalition Council has authorized me to make Earth humanity a formal offer of membership in our alliance. But first, your leaders must understand what membership entails. Colonel Martinez had been listening carefully to the conversation, and now she stepped forward. Commander, I speak for the United States military, but this decision will need to involve our civilian leadership and potentially the United Nations. Can you give us an overview of what coalition membership would mean? Thekval gestured to science leader Krixthan, who activated a device similar to the one Zix had used earlier. The holographic display that appeared this time was far more complex, showing hundreds of star systems connected by flowing lines of light. The coalition currently includes 47 spacefaring civilizations, Krixthan explained as the display zoomed in on various worlds. Each member species contributes according to their abilities and receives protection and technological assistance in return. For Earth humanity, membership would mean access to clean energy technology, medical knowledge that could eliminate most diseases, and eventually the ability to establish colonies among the stars. Vorge added, but membership also means commitment to help defend coalition space against the Harvesters and other threats. Earth humans would need to learn to fight in ways your species has never imagined. Marcus listened to the conversation with growing amazement. They were talking about transforming human civilization overnight, about solving problems that had seemed impossible just days ago. But he also noticed something in the way the coalition representatives spoke about the Harvesters. Despite their advanced technology and multiple species alliance, they were clearly afraid. How dangerous are these Harvesters? Marcus asked, surprising himself by speaking up in such an important conversation. The three coalition representatives exchanged glances before Thickval answered. Marcus Human asks, "Good question. Harvesters destroyed 17 civilizations before coalition formed. Since Alliance began, we have saved many worlds but also lost 6 coalition members to Harvester attacks. They are difficult to fight. They adapt quickly to our weapons and tactics." Science leader Crixthan continued. "This is why Earth humanity is so important to the coalition. Your species shows unusual creativity in problem-solving and combat tactics. Also, human brains work differently than other coalition species. You may see solutions that we cannot." Marcus felt a chill of fear mixed with pride. Humanity was being recruited not just for protection, but because they might be the key to winning a war that the coalition had been fighting for centuries. Colonel Martinez was taking notes rapidly as she asked detailed questions about coalition technology, military requirements, and political structure, but Marcus found himself focusing on Zix, who had been quietly observing the conversation with her 3 golden eyes. She caught him looking at her and moved closer. "Marcus worried about human people?" she asked softly. Marcus nodded. "This is all so big. A few days ago, my biggest worry was a math test. Now we're talking about joining an interstellar alliance and fighting cosmic monsters. What if we're not ready? What if we make the wrong choice?" Sykes placed one of her tiny hands on his shoulder, and Marcus felt the same sense of calm that had helped him find the courage to break into the power station. Marcus Zix see human people through Marcus eyes. See how Marcus care for others. How Marcus willing to risk everything to help stranger. If all humans little bit like Marcus, then galaxy become better place because humans join coalition. Before Marcus could respond, Commander Thickval approached them. "Marcus Human, Coalition Council has asked me to make you special offer. You have shown qualities that would make you valuable as diplomatic liaison between Earth humans and Coalition species. Would you consider coming to Coalition Central World to learn and speak for your species?" Marcus felt his world tilt again. They were offering him a chance to travel to the stars, to see alien worlds and be part of something bigger than anything he'd ever imagined. But they were also asking him to leave everything he'd ever known, to represent humanity in decisions that would affect the entire planet. "I'm just a kid," Marcus said weakly. "I don't know anything about diplomacy or politics." Science leader Crixthan made that crystal chime sound again. "Marcus Human, leadership is not about knowledge that can be learned from books. Leadership is about making right choices when others cannot. You have already shown this quality." Vorgesh nodded his massive head. "Also, Coalition would provide education and training, and Zix has volunteered to remain as your guide and translator during learning period." Marcus looked around at the assembled group, all of them waiting for his response. Human military officers and government officials, alien representatives from across the galaxy, and at the center of it all, a 12-year-old boy from Minnesota who had just wanted to help something that was hurt. But as overwhelming as the choice was, Marcus realized that he had already made his decision the moment he opened his window and found Zix in the snow. He had committed himself to helping others, no matter how strange or impossible the situation might seem. "I'll do it," Marcus said, his voice stronger than he felt. "But I want to talk to my parents first. They deserve to know what's happening." Colonel Martinez smiled for the first time since arriving at the power station. "We'll arrange a full briefing for them, and they'll be kept informed of your activities at all times. This is too important to humanity's future to be handled any other way." Commander Thickval made a sound that Marcus was learning to recognize as Veltar approval. "Coalition ship will remain in Earth orbit for one of your weeks to allow for government consultations and preparation. But Marcus Human, your training must begin soon." Harvester fleet moves closer each day. As the group began making plans for the formal contact between the Coalition and Earth's governments, Marcus felt Zix take his hand in her tiny fingers. Together they looked up at the star-filled sky that no longer seemed empty and cold, but filled with the promise of friends and allies among the distant suns. Marcus had saved one alien's life on a frozen night in Minnesota. In return, that alien was about to help him save two worlds and forge an alliance that would reshape the galaxy. Sometimes the most important moments in history begin with the simplest acts of kindness. 3 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of Coalition Central Station, looking out at a view that still took his breath away every single day. The massive space station orbited a binary star system, and its transparent aluminum windows provided an unobstructed view of two golden suns dancing around each other in an eternal cosmic ballet. The station itself was a marvel of engineering that housed representatives from all 47 Coalition member species. Gardens from a dozen different worlds created habitats for beings who had evolved under different stars, while gravity fields could be adjusted to accommodate species that range from barely visible energy beings to massive rock creatures that measured their lifespans in geological epochs. Marcus had adapted to his new life with surprising ease, though he still video called his parents on Earth every day. The conversation with his family about his sudden role as humanity's first galactic ambassador had been one of the most difficult experiences of his life, but his parents had ultimately supported his decision with the kind of love that made him proud to be human. His sister Emma had summed up the family's attitude perfectly. You saved the world by helping a space cat. Of course, you have to go to space school. The education Marcus received at Coalition Central was unlike anything available on Earth. He studied xenobiology with professors who were themselves examples of the life forms they taught about. He learned interstellar politics from diplomats who had been negotiating between species for longer than human civilization had existed. Most importantly, he learned about the harvesters from military commanders who had fought them across multiple star systems. The harvesters, Marcus discovered, were not simply a hostile species expanding their territory. They were something far more terrifying, a civilization that had transcended biological existence and now existed purely to consume and convert matter into more of themselves. They moved through the galaxy like a slow-motion plague, turning planets into raw materials and entire species into processing units for their ever-expanding collective. What made them particularly dangerous was their ability to learn and adapt. Each coalition defense that had proven successful was quickly analyzed and countered by the Harvester collective intelligence. They didn't just destroy civilizations, they absorbed their knowledge and used it to become even more efficient at destruction. But during his studies, Marcus began to notice something that puzzled him. For all their technological sophistication and military prowess, the coalition species shared a common weakness. They all thought in terms of logical, systematic approaches to problems. Their strategies were elegant and efficient, but they were also predictable. Marcus's human brain, shaped by millions of years of evolution on a chaotic world full of unpredictable predators and constantly changing environments, worked differently. Where coalition strategists saw the need for careful planning and systematic approaches, Marcus saw opportunities for improvisation and creative chaos. Zix, who had indeed remained as his guide and translator, was one of the first to recognize the potential in Marcus's unconventional thinking. Zix watched Marcus learn coalition ways, she told him one evening as they shared a meal in the station's Earth habitat section, where gravity and atmosphere had been adjusted to human norms. But Zix think Marcus' mind worked better when not trying to think like coalition minds. Marcus looked up from the fascinating alien fruit he'd been trying to eat without making a mess. What do you mean? Zix's three eyes focused on him with that intense intelligence that still amazed him. Coalition people very smart, but coalition people all think same way. Make plans, follow rules, use logic to solve problems. Very good for building stations and teaching knowledge. Not so good for fighting enemies who learn all coalition patterns. You think humans might fight differently? Zix think Marcus fight very differently. Remember how Marcus get into power plays? Not follow security rules or use proper tools. Marcus use bicycle and drainage pipe and climb through window. Very human solution. Marcus laughed, remembering that desperate night that now seemed like a lifetime ago. My teachers here keep telling me that I need to learn proper procedures for everything. Zix made her sound of amusement. Zix think Marcus should learn procedures, but also think Marcus should trust Marcus' instincts. Harvesters not expect human chaos. A few days later, Marcus's unconventional thinking was put to the test during a strategic simulation involving a harvester attack on a coalition colony world. The scenario was based on a real attack that had occurred 2 years earlier, where coalition forces had failed to prevent the planet's destruction, despite having superior numbers and technology. Marcus was assigned to work with a team of military strategists from various coalition species, tasked with developing a defense plan that could have saved the colony. For hours, his teammates developed increasingly sophisticated tactical responses involving coordinated fleet movements, orbital bombardments, and carefully timed evacuations. But as Marcus studied the simulation data, he found himself thinking not about military tactics, but about something much more basic: what the harvesters actually wanted from the planet. "What if we're thinking about this wrong?" Marcus said during one of their planning sessions. "Everyone keeps talking about how to fight the harvesters more effectively, but what if the real solution is to make the planet not worth taking?" Admiral Kortok, a reptilian strategist with centuries of military experience, looked at Marcus with polite confusion. "Well, the harvesters want to convert the planet's matter into more of themselves, right? But what if we could change the planet's matter into something they can't use? Something that would actually damage them if they tried to harvest it?" The room fell silent as the assembled strategists considered this possibility. Dr. Vexenari, a gaseous being who specialized in xenogeology, spoke first. "Theoretically possible. Harvester conversion process requires specific molecular structures, but to alter an entire planet's composition would require technology we do not possess." Marcus grinned, feeling that familiar spark of human ingenuity that had gotten him through so many impossible situations. What if we don't need to change the whole planet? What if we just need to change enough of it to make the harvesters think the whole planet is contaminated? Over the next several hours, Marcus and his team developed a strategy that was so unconventional it bordered on the absurd. With Trust Teddy, instead of fighting the harvesters directly, they would use quantum-level matter converters to alter random patches of the planet's surface, creating molecular structures that were toxic to harvester technology. The changes would be subtle enough to avoid detection until the harvesters actually began their conversion process, at which point their own machinery would be damaged by the altered matter. When they presented their strategy to the simulation committee, the reaction was mixed. Some coalition strategists dismissed it as too risky and unpredictable. Others were intrigued by its potential effectiveness against an enemy that had learned to counter all conventional tactics. Admiral Thekfall, Zix's former commander, made the final decision. "We will test human Marcus strategy in simulation. If successful, we will consider implementing similar tactics in real defensive scenarios." The simulation ran for 3 days, with the committee running hundreds of variations to test the strategy's effectiveness under different conditions. When the results were announced, even Marcus was surprised by how successful his unconventional approach had been. In 73% of the simulations, the harvesters had withdrawn from the planet after suffering significant damage to their conversion machinery. In another 20%, the damage had been severe enough to delay their operations long enough for coalition reinforcements to arrive and drive them off completely. Most importantly, in none of the simulations had the harvesters been able to adapt their technology quickly enough to overcome the sabotage before suffering major losses. "Congratulations, human Marcus," Admiral Thekfall said after the final simulation results were announced. "Your strategy represents the first significant tactical innovation against harvester forces in over 50 years. The Coalition Military Council has voted to implement similar approaches throughout our defensive networks." But Marcus's real moment of triumph came later that day, when Zix found him in the station's observation lounge, still staring out at the twin suns in amazement at what had happened. "Zix, proud of Marcus," she said, settling beside him in the chair designed for beings of her size. "Marcus showed Coalition that human thinking very valuable, but Zykes think this just beginning of what Marcus can do. Marcus turned to look at his friend, the alien who had changed his life by trusting him with hers. "What do you mean?" Zix's 3 golden eyes sparkled with excitement. "Coalition Council want to establish new position. Special Advisor for Unconventional Strategies. They want Marcus to be first human chaos strategist in Coalition history." Marcus felt that familiar mixture of excitement and terror that had become the constant background of his new life. "They want me to professionally think outside the box?" Marcus, think outside all boxes. Think outside station. Think outside star system. Make harvesters very confused and very sorry they tried to attack good people planets. As they sat together watching the binary stars wheel through their ancient dance, Marcus reflected on the incredible journey that had brought him to this moment. 6 months ago, he had been an ordinary kid worried about math tests and social awkwardness. Now he was helping to develop strategies that might save entire civilizations from destruction. But the most remarkable thing wasn't the technology or the alien worlds or the incredible responsibilities he had inherited. The most remarkable thing was that it had all started with the simplest possible human impulse, seeing something that was hurt and wanting to help. That impulse, Zix had taught him, was more rare and precious than any advanced technology. It was the foundation of everything good that intelligent beings could build together. Marcus had learned that the galaxy was vast and dangerous, filled with wonders and terrors beyond human imagination. But he had also learned that it was full of good people, of all species, who were willing to stand together against the darkness. And sometimes, when you were very lucky, saving one small life in the snow could become the first step towards saving everything. The harvesters were still coming, still moving through space toward Earth and the other coalition worlds, but now they would face something they had never encountered before: the chaotic, creative, absolutely unpredictable strategic thinking of humanity. Marcus smiled as he watched the stars dance, knowing that the galaxy was about to discover what humans could accomplish when they were given impossible problems to solve and the friends they needed to solve them. The war for the galaxy had begun, and Earth's greatest weapon turned out to be a 12-year-old boy who couldn't ignore something that was scratching at his door on a cold night. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness change everything. Left to freeze, the alien cat scratched at the door. What happened after shocked the human boy? HFY.